All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. My name is Marcus Nebro, and I'm part of the client services team over at Tutor.com. And these past couple of months have been interesting to say the least, and for many folks, it's been a lot to adjust to. And we've been hearing from a lot of the students and partners that we work with, whether libraries, universities, military partners, and many more, that with everything going on, they'd love to know a little bit more about the core concepts we're going to be going over just to help out with remote learning and the remote lifestyle that we're kind of stuck with today. So this past summer, we created the Student Success Series, which was super popular, and we wanted to offer it again with some slight updates because now it's more relevant than ever with school officially underway. Today's session is going to be all about time management, and we're going to be having sessions every Friday at the same time for the next couple of weeks. So be sure to take a look at what's coming up and register for whatever interests you. Before we get started, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So if at any point you have any questions or would like some clarification on things, please feel free to send them over through the question box attached to your control panel, and we'll get to those at the end. And again, if you have any technical issues, don't worry, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar to everybody so you can always review the content then. Now, back to today's session. Our host is the wonderful Amy Dietzman, and she'll be going over some tips and tricks on time management. So I'll just pass it on over to her.
Great, thank you so much. Hi there, everybody. To give you just a little background on me, I started my career in education as a high school English teacher. After earning my doctorate, my first higher education teaching job was teaching an online student success course. I eventually moved into teaching education psychology courses for Arizona State University online, where I still teach today, and I also work full-time at Tutor.com. So my goal today is to tell you a little bit about what I've learned from my own students, but mainly it's to tell you about what I learned as a student. I got 2 of my degrees as an online working adult. I had 2 little kids at home, and while I was working on one of my degrees, I changed jobs twice. I get what it means to be busy. I also get what it means to be overwhelmed. I know what it feels like to be exhausted while trying to stay motivated and juggling a million things, though I did not do it during a pandemic. But I'm here to tell you that I did figure out a strategy. And if anyone were to ask me how I did it, well, I always tell them time management and discipline. I'm going to share with you today some of my secrets, and they aren't really secrets. It's not rocket science. It's probably things you've heard before, but maybe not all at once. So here are some strategies that work. And let me start by saying some of these tips are going to come across as a little rigid. Being a successful student is a sacrifice, but there is a time and place for fun, friends, and family. So stick with me to the end, and I'm going to show you how. This graphic is a great illustration of the typical college student. This is pre-pandemic. If anyone here is fortunate enough to be a full-time college student attending school in person with no job, no debt, and no kids, well, then you are really lucky, and you are not the majority anymore. If you're a full-time high school student or middle school student, I know there may be some of you on this call, you're still going to learn a lot today, especially with the changing look of schools. And some of the tips I give you today will hopefully you can take them with you when you go to college. But a few interesting statistics I want to point out from this graphic. 26% of students are working full-time, and 36% work at least part-time while going to school. 28% of college students actually have kids of their own. And among college students today, nearly half, 40%, are age 25 or they're older, and they're returning to advance their career or to retrain for a new opportunity. So why does time management matter so much? Well, time management equals productivity. The better you manage your time, the more you're going to get done. It's really that simple. Did you know that there have been studies done on people who make their beds first thing in the morning? And those people are more productive throughout their day than people who don't make their beds. And why is it? Well, it's because bed makers start their day completing a task. They're productive, and this leads to the next task and the next, which brings me to another reason why time management matters, because success leads to more success. Once you've had a productive morning or a productive day, you will be more likely to continue with that success. So think about a time when you've had like a successful week where you've managed your time and you've completed all your tasks just as you planned. That success will carry you on to the next week or the next class or maybe even the next semester. You know those days like when you feel kind of lazy and you wake up and you lay on the couch for a while? Don't you find it like 10 times harder to be productive on those days? I'm not saying we don't all need days like that, because we do. But those days start out less productive. And therefore, that's my next tip. Falling behind is a vicious cycle. Just like success leads to more success. Once you've gotten yourself on a schedule of doing things at the last minute, it's way harder to get caught up and stay caught up. And that overwhelmed feeling starts to take over. So take the tips I share with you today and use them at the very beginning of a course or the very beginning of a semester or even just the very beginning of a week. And if that seems like a lot, just start a day productively and just see where it takes you. See if that feeling of completing a task first thing leads to more. Also, procrastination, leads to stress. And this is probably the biggest mistake I see in all the classes I teach. High school, college, grad students, I even teach doctoral students, and it is point blank the worst way to tackle school, and it will cause you the most angst. But there is hope. Creating good time habits is possible. You can set yourself up for success day after day, week after week, class after class, but it takes consistency. You have to do it right over and over again. And being a good manager of time is a lifelong skill. Life is always going to be busy, and you will always have to figure out how to get things done on a schedule. So why not learn now? This is a list of time suckers. These things, and probably a combination of many, are what eat up your time and cause you to feel like you're just not getting things done. Unclear priorities and goals is something we're going to talk about a little bit more today. If you don't decide what is important to you, how can you organize your time efficiently? If you're disorganized, you're probably spending a lot of time looking for things and trying to remember what you're supposed to be doing and feeling like you're always running late. Another big time pitfall is saying yes too often and overcommitting. And this can be eliminated by setting your priorities and saying no to things that distract you from your goals. We're going to talk more about these pitfalls as we go. So how do we avoid these time pitfalls? Well, I'm going to give you 10 tips today, and I could probably talk about each one of these for like an hour, but I'm going to jam-pack this session with all my best stuff. So take one tip, take them all, start small and work up, but don't feel like you have to try and literally rearrange your whole life today. Because no matter where you are in your educational journey, you're just going to look at these tips from your perspective and think about if it's something you could try. One of the best strategies I ever learned was putting first things first. When I was getting my doctoral degree, I quickly realized that I did my best work in the morning, before the day got away from me, before everyone in my life started asking me for stuff, before I started running in a million different directions, and really before I got tired and before my brain started to get distracted. So believe it or not, for 3.5 years, I got up at 4:30 in the morning every day to study and write. And it became my routine. I got to the point where I didn't even need to set an alarm. I just woke up, grabbed my cup of coffee, and went to my computer while my house was still and quiet. And I worked anywhere from 1 to 3 hours straight before anybody in my house woke up. And then I switched gears and went about my day. Listen, it took discipline. I went to bed really early for those years, but I created a productive space for myself. Think about what you do first every day. Is it the most important thing you do in the day? What about when you get to work every day? You may not think you're doing the most important thing first, but you probably are. At least you're giving it your most important time. Maybe getting up at 4:30 won't work for you. But can you get up an hour earlier, or can you use your morning time a little differently? Our willpower is highest in the morning. That's why if you really feel that something is important, you should do it first. And this means work tasks, school tasks, exercise. But I get it. I know some of you are probably saying, no way, I am a terrible morning person. I cannot do this. This lady's crazy. But that's okay, because night owls are still successful. This is where your habits and your discipline get to shine. You can create your space for your schoolwork, but you just need to be more disciplined, because other commitments and distractions will creep in and steal your time. So if you say you're going to study, let's just say between 7 and 9 every night, you're going to have to stick to it. And just like I told you that success, it will create more success. So if you're a working parent and you're going to school, you have to be disciplined and very scheduled. This means that you have to have dinner at a certain time. Your kids go to bed at a certain time. You shut everything off and you do your work at a certain time. If you're a typical high school or college student and you're still young, you still have to get yourself into a routine. You still have to know your strengths and weaknesses. Consistency is key, as you are constantly reinforcing to yourself and to those around you that you are committed. Step 2 is to get organized. If you're going to be consistent, you're going to need to keep track of your to-dos. And I've put together a few cool organizational apps you can use if you're into that sort of thing. Remember the Milk, Microsoft To Do, and AnyDo help you organize your tasks for your day, connect them to your calendar, and share your lists with others. If looking at your calendar doesn't come naturally to you, then just try one of these apps and set alerts. Remember that success creates more success. I've said that so many times. So when you have a list and you begin to cross things off your list, it is a win and it will motivate you. People who aren't list makers think those who are funny and maybe ridiculous. My husband thinks I'm crazy with my lists, but when life gets hectic and you have a lot to remember, trust me, you will find lists to be helpful. And I keep different types of lists, those related to my job and those related to my personal life and my family. Part of getting organized is getting organized in all areas of your life. You don't want to be organized at work and then come home to chaos, because that chaos is going to stress you out and keep you from being really a master time manager. The great thing about having ongoing lists is that when you have random thoughts in the middle of a class or right when you're trying to write a paper, you can just quickly add whatever comes to your mind to your list and then forget about it and keep focused on the task at hand. So I keep an open note on my phone where I keep an ongoing grocery list, because inevitably I'll be working on something and remember I need peanut butter, or random things I need to remember to do over the weekend, like, oh, I didn't clean the bathtub last weekend, I need to do that. So I just throw that on my list and I delete and add to that same list week after week. And it helps me keep room in my brain for the other things that are more important at the time. So these are education-specific apps, and they are good options for keeping track of assignments and due dates. I came up with a few here, but there are many more. You just go to your app store and find one that works for you. When you start a class or a big project is assigned, start your path to success by getting on a schedule. Put assignments on your calendar, make lists of the tasks you need to complete leading up to the assignments. So here's the thing. Putting final due dates on your calendar is only a first step. One thing students often do is they see that due date and then that's when they start working on their assignment. And that's a big pitfall. Try getting more granular. So like if your assignment is due on a Sunday, but you need to read the textbook, find other articles on a topic, write a rough draft, and then turn it in all by Sunday, well then you need to start earlier in the week. So you need to break that up into like 3 or 4 different scheduled times. Taking the time to get organized at the beginning of a term or the beginning of a week will pay off throughout your week. I promise you, you will be able to compartmentalize the school stuff because you're going to know exactly what you have to do when, instead of going through your week knowing that you have something coming up, but not really sure when you're going to get it done. That causes more stress. Step 3 is to know your priorities. Remember how I started with time pitfalls and I said that a lot of people don't know their priorities. Well, if you confuse what is a priority with what is just a distraction, then you will waste time all the time. You may have heard of Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and that's where this graphic came from. He says that people who have mastered time management understand where their priorities fall and spend their time in that Q2, being effective and efficient. Note that quadrant 2 still leaves time for recreation and creative thinking. It's not all work. But some people spend a lot of time dealing with Q3 tasks, and they confuse them with Q1 tasks. They think these tasks are important when they really aren't. And that is why Q3 is called the quadrant of deception. Many times, the urgency of these tasks is due to others' priorities or needs and not yours. A good way to differentiate a Q3 task from a Q1 task is to ask yourself this. Is this task related to my goals? Is this task going to get me closer to graduation? Is this task going to help me get a better job? And then Q4 is called the quadrant of waste, and for good reason, because it contains all your time wasters. A lot of people have a tendency to hover around quadrants 3 and 4. After resolving their Q3 tasks, they enter into autopilot mode and spend all their time in Q4. And this can be because they have nothing better to do, or they are procrastinating on the things they should be doing. Quadrant 4 creates no value in our lives whatsoever. Note that the word excessive comes before relaxation, TV, gaming, internet. It has to be excessive to fall here. So a good question to ask yourself if it's excessive is, did that just keep me from doing something that I should be doing? Or do I feel fulfilled now that I just spent 4 hours on Snapchat? And if your answer is no, you probably need to cut it down. Step 4 is to just start. Research papers and projects are always overwhelming when you first look at them. And there is no way to gain momentum if you don't just start. So tackle small things first. Look at the parts of the assignment that you do understand and start there. And that may not be at the beginning. Most students procrastinate because they have a fear of failure or because they are confused by an assignment. When you're confused, you probably get frustrated, and then you waste time feeling frustrated. Sometimes if you just start, even at the smallest step, things will become more clear. Well, be productive. It seems obvious and easy, right? But it's not. One thing I learned from my students over the years is that most say they struggle with productivity because their workspaces are a mess. So they decide to straighten up before they get started on their studying. And before they know it, 2 hours have gone by, and guess what? No studying. One way to be productive is to set your space up for productivity. Organize your desk area at the end of each study session. That way, when you say you're going to start studying at 7 p.m., you can walk right into your space and start. Also, one little tip I always do for my work or my school life, I make my list at the end of my workday for all the things I want to remember to do the next day. That way I can jump into each day when my willpower and my motivation is the highest and just start, just get going. An example of controlling time, the time that you have, is this. I used to take my kids to swim lessons 2 nights a week. And during that time, I would watch them swim, scroll through my phone. Sometimes I went shopping at my favorite clothing store that was right down the street. And so then when I became a student, I planned ahead and I used my time to be productive. I downloaded all the articles I would need to read for my class early that morning. I pulled up the textbook chapters I would need on my computer, and then I took my laptop to swim practice. I didn't have internet, and that was no problem because I already had everything ready. And I would complete my readings for the week and take notes while I watched my kids swim. So I told you I wasn't a night person, and I knew that about myself. So I didn't try to write or do some heavy brain projects during that time, but I used it because it was time that was literally handed to me. I had to be there. So why not be productive? Think about that a little bit and use the time that you have too. One of the biggest mistakes I see college students make is taking unnecessary time off from school. High school students too. I mean, you decide you don't feel like doing homework for a week, so you don't. And the worst thing about doing this is that it upsets your momentum and your routine. If you're feeling burned out, know that you're not alone, especially right now. I mean, everybody's burned out from seeing the same room all day, every day, over and over again. But take a weekend off or take a day off of work and school and do something fun and outdoorsy or whatever you can do. Reward yourself at the end of a semester, but don't shut down unless you absolutely have to for your mental state. And what I mean by shut down is I've had students who've decided to take a semester off or a couple of semesters off, and that's what I mean is then it's really hard to get back into it again. So it's just best to try your hardest to reward yourself in small ways. Step 7 is to avoid procrastination. This is the biggest one. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to work ahead in your classes. Why? Well, because life happens. When I was in grad school, my husband broke his leg on a Friday. I had a huge paper due that Sunday. Thank goodness I had my paper mostly done because that weekend was absolute chaos. He needed surgery. We were back and forth to the hospital, which was way across town. And when I brought him home, I had to wait on him hand and foot. He couldn't even climb the stairs. And I would not have been able to write that paper if I'd waited until the day it was due. My students always have trouble with this. Every single week, someone loses internet right around midnight when the paper's due, or someone gets sick, someone has an unexpected emergency. A lot of times, I realize it's an excuse, but a lot of times it's probably true because I know that life happens. So think of pulling weeds. I hate pulling weeds, but if you had 10 weeds to pull, you'd be more likely to go out and pick those 10 weeds than you would if you waited until there were 300, right? That's an analogy for this. When I was a student, I had a schedule. I spread my work out so I didn't have to do it all at once. A little bit every day is way more manageable than a lot once a week. So do your best to use the same schedule every week, no matter what is due, so you stay in a routine. Some weeks you'll use the time to work ahead. Some weeks you'll be a little more under the gun, but be consistent, do a little bit every day, work ahead, and you will believe you can do it, and you will do it. 80 to 95% of college students engage in procrastination. And 75% consider themselves procrastinators. They actually call themselves that. 50% procrastinate consistently and, very importantly, problematically. And procrastinators don't see it as a strength. So I liked working ahead also because it gave me time to reflect. Have you ever worked on an assignment and then you walked away from it and you thought about it and you went, oh yeah, I should have added this, or I could have written it like that? Well, if you procrastinate, you don't have the luxury of walking away and reflecting on what you just did because you have to turn it in right away. So you're not really always giving it your best effort, which leads to this. Why procrastinating is so bad? Well, students who turn in assignments at the last minute tend to get lower grades. Procrastinators are often afraid of failing, and procrastination increases stress, depression, anxiety, and fatigue, and not to mention guilt. When you think you're going to work on an assignment on a Wednesday, and don't you start to feel a little guilty when you put it off on Thursday, and then a little bit more guilty when you realize on Friday that you still haven't done it? Just get rid of the guilt by doing the things that you set out to do when you set out to do them. Eliminate distractions. Don't be on everyone else's schedule. If you're responding to texts and your emails, then you're distracted by other people's mission, other people's goals for that day. Or if you're distracted by what your roommate or your spouse is watching on TV, you're on their schedule and not yours. And you're also wasting precious time. When it's time for you to work, put your phone on silent and leave it in another room. Hard to do, but it works. Turn off the alerts that you get on your computer from your social media accounts or your email. Don't work in the same room as your TV or your video game console if it's something that you really want to play, if you can avoid it. Also, there are studies that show you shouldn't try to work or study in your bedroom because your bed becomes a distraction. If you find that your dorm room or your bedroom is a problem for you, find somewhere else to do your work. Maybe you need to sit outside, or maybe you need to go to a coffee shop if you have one that's open around you. And maybe that you'll find that that's a better place for you to work. You might have to try a few different places and just see, where am I most productive? Also, if the kitchen is the hub of your house and people are in and out of there a lot, distracting you while you're trying to study, that's probably not a good place for you to work. Step 9 is to set boundaries and expectations with your friends and family. I have a friend who was a grad student, and he said that every time he sat down to do his schoolwork, his wife would come in and start talking to him. She would turn on the TV, and then she'd ask him if he wanted to go to the gym. He had to set boundaries with her and let her know that his study time was sacred, but he also had to be careful not to give up his study time on a whim. I set boundaries with my kids who knew that when mom was on the computer, it was study time. Me going to school was a sacrifice for our whole family, but it was also me showing my kids that I was committed to something and that I was going to complete what I started. I hear so many adult students who feel guilty for going to school. They shouldn't, and you shouldn't. You are setting an example for your kids or your family, and you are probably trying to create a better life for them. But one caveat to all of this is that you must set a routine so your family knows what to expect. If your study time is all over the place and you move from room to room, it's really hard for others, especially little kids, to understand and adjust. So set your study times and stick to them. If your schedule has to change daily or weekly, post your schedule somewhere so others around you know and so that they can hold you accountable. And if you need help from a spouse or a friend or your parents while you're trying to work on a big project, ask for it. Don't try to do everything. Ask for babysitting help. Ask your roommate to grab you a sandwich. Ask your parents to hold you accountable while you're studying for your final exam. And now we're to the best part, finding work-school life balance. Fun and family time are that much better when you've met your goals for the day or week. Just because I was, always on a schedule didn't mean that I didn't know when to turn it off. See, if I spent 3 hours early on a Saturday morning writing, then I still had the whole day left to go for a hike or take my kids to the park, bake, or make dinner for my family. And don't think that I didn't take naps. I definitely took naps. But my students often complain that their friends are a bad influence and distract them from doing their schoolwork because they feel pressured to go out on Friday or Saturday nights when they are often trying to study. And I tell them, your friends might be the problem, but also, did you ever consider that you could schedule your week differently? So maybe you can go out on Friday with your friends. Sometimes it's not possible, but if you've procrastinated, then you're going to be the one stressing out and telling others that you can't go do something fun when you really want to. No one says your life has to end when you're a student. So manage your time, stick to your schedule, and then reward yourself when you've completed your tasks. So as a reminder, here are the 10 steps I just provided all in one place. Step 1 is to put first things first. You don't have to be a morning person, but you have to know your priorities, which is number 3. Step 2 is to get organized. Also, don't forget to just start. If you get stuck, find one thing that makes sense to you and start there. Step 5 is to be productive. Use the time you have. If you have time where you're sitting around waiting on someone or scrolling through social media, use that time in a different way. Step 6 is to keep your momentum. Don't stop unless you absolutely have to. Step 7 is to avoid procrastination. Easier said than done, I realize, but it's all about success, creating more success. Step 8 is to eliminate your distractions. Get rid of your phone when you're really trying to study. Step 9 is to set boundaries with your family and your friends and make sure you're sticking to a schedule so those around you know what to expect. And step 10 is to find your balance. Make sure you're still having fun or you're really going to burn yourself out. Here are the references, some of the things I used today. And here's the next one coming up next week. Before we get to questions, I just want to let you know that this webinar is the same time, same place, and this one's going to be about goal setting and decision making. How do you set goals when you're a student that will motivate you and not discourage you? And how do you change habits so you can reach your goals and not get stuck along the way? We're going to talk about that, so I hope to see you all next week. And now we'll go back to Marcus.
All right. So again, if you have any questions about any of the content that we just covered, feel free to send those over into the question box. But before we get started on that, I did just want to mention follow our socials. If you follow our Facebook and Instagram, you'll be up to date on all of the different webinars that we have going on and anything else that we decide to do in the future. And our YouTube channel. We have a bunch of previous webinars as well as guides and walkthroughs of the Tutor.com platform. So really it would be totally helpful for you to go there and check it out. Now, so some questions that came in. Let's see. Do you have any tips for someone who's already feeling overwhelmed with the backlog that they've procrastinated on?
Ooh, yes. So this, I'll give an example. This happened to my son who is in high school. Last semester when we first went online with the pandemic, he kind of didn't really get into it at first, and he got really backed up and ended up having all these assignments due, and he started to feel overwhelmed and was like, I can't do it. So what we did is we just made a very strict schedule. Monday, you're going to catch up on these 3 assignments. Tuesday, you're going to catch up on these 4 assignments. We just had to sit down and kind of work it out, look at the time he had available. And at the same time, while he was trying to get older things done, I was trying to get him caught up on the stuff that was actually due. So, it took some time looking at his schedule, looking at, due dates, looking at the days of the week, and just laying it out. And I made a checklist, and for him, we printed it out, and that was easy for him to just go through. It was just, it became a list where he just started crossing things off. And honestly, it only took, I would say, 2 days of him seeing, okay, I'm getting through this, to start to feel like he was making progress and to start getting motivated again. So, and this is, a son who generally doesn't do this, but the world was crazy at that time. So it was kind of a new world for him not to have turned in some assignments. But anyways, my best recommendation is literally, you just have to lay it all out in one place where you see it, and you schedule your time and you block off your time, and you just have to go. There's nothing you can do but just start.
Awesome. The next question is something that I relate to a bit too much. How do I abide by my alarm reminders of things to do? I tend to snooze them and end up
Yeah.
rescheduling the task.
Well, it's kind of like what I just said. You just have to do it. But just remembering that success creates more success. So doing it and feeling good about it will make you want to do it again. So it's really just a matter of starting that routine of not doing that. It also, be honest with yourself. Why are you snoozing it? Are you snoozing it because you have something better to do? Are you snoozing it because you're procrastinating because you're afraid of failing? Are you snoozing it because, I don't know, what's distracting you? There's probably something there, and you need to be honest with yourself, and you might need to, be in a different place. Physically, maybe you're just sitting in the wrong room. Your alerts are coming up while you're in the middle of a TV show, and that's not, obviously a good idea. Maybe your alerts are coming up at the wrong times. You're maybe having them come up in the morning. You're not a morning person. So it's kind of just sitting there and really reflecting on, what is it that's making me do this, and how can I start the day off right and not do this anymore? And I promise you, a couple of days, a couple of successes are going to lead to more successes. You're going to like the way it feels when you don't have all these backlogged, alerts.
Awesome. Noted for personal reference.
Noted.
So another question that we have, and I feel like it might be a similar answer, but how do I get started creating a schedule or list? Even that can feel overwhelming.
Oh yeah. Well, it's baby steps. So I would say, maybe I don't know your situation, but let's just say you are taking 3 classes right now. Maybe you just start with 1 class, just a baby step. You're going to look at, if you get, my class that I teach has the class schedule comes out at the very beginning of the class. So students can actually plan ahead for the full 8-week course, see exactly when the assignments are due. I mean, I would start with that if you can, if you have that kind of thing available to you, or the syllabus or whatever, and you can actually take that 1 class and just start to lay out times. And like I said, a little bit every day it still doesn't feel as overwhelming as trying to schedule 4 or 5 hour blocks. Very few people can literally sit down and focus on writing a paper, or reading and taking notes and studying for tests for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, very few people can do that. A lot of students think they can, and they try to schedule it that way. Oh, on Saturday, I'll wake up at 7 a.m. and I'll do this. And, 18-year-olds aren't going to do that. Some 18-year-olds might, but none that I know. So the best thing to do is to give yourself just a little bit of time each day to get things done, and just plug away. Okay, Monday, I'm going to read this 1 article. And then Tuesday, I'm going to, answer this discussion question, and that's it. Just keep it simple, small things each day, and start to see how you feel. If that makes you feel productive and you're realizing, hey, I'm getting there, then add in more time, add in more classes, and just keep your momentum.
All right, the next question looks like it relates to step 8, which is eliminating distractions. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to now that everybody's stuck at home. But what if your
Mm,
bedroom has like a small desk and you can only really work there?
yeah.
And how do you eliminate those distractions?
Oh, that's good. I mean, sometimes, yeah, you don't have the luxury of an extra bedroom where you can go, or the coffee shop down the street. So absolutely, the bedroom may be your only choice, and maybe you are distracted by your bed, maybe you're not. I would definitely make sure that your space is organized, and that your bedroom stuff isn't in the space where you're doing your work. So you're not throwing your clothes over your chair, or, whatever, your makeup sitting on your desk. You don't want that kind of thing to be distracting to you. So your workspace needs to be organized as a workspace, and you need to have kind of a perimeter set around it. If you can, I would face away from the bedroom and the things that might distract you, like, oh, I need to put that laundry away, that's over there, or I need to clean that or vacuum or whatever. If you can turn your desk in a way that's facing away from the room, or facing out a window or something like that, that's always better. And, even though you're in your bedroom, you can obviously still take your phone, put it in another room, turn off alerts, those kinds of things. And yeah, I mean, I know kids are around, and I don't know if you have kids and if that's a thing, or you're hearing, I have a friend who said that she hears her husband on his Zoom calls all day long, and it drives her crazy because they're in this house and he's really loud and he laughs really loud. And she loves him, but she's like, he's so annoying. And so, I mean, I get it. Those things are happening. I mean, maybe you need to invest in some headphones so you don't hear that, and you put on some classical music and you try to zone out the things that you're hearing across the room, or the dogs barking, or the kids knocking on the door. So, I mean, there's no perfect solution right now. And I know that. I realize that. Like I said, my solution when I had small kids and I was studying was to get up before they were up. That worked for me. That may not work for you. You might have someone sleeping in the room there, and that doesn't work. But you might have to just kind of play around with times in the day and see if you can find that time where there's just a teensy bit better opportunity to get quiet. That's my best advice.
Awesome. The next one, kind of similar, but does rotating different locations for your workspace every other day help at all with like clearing distractions, or would you recommend something like that if you have the space to move your workspace?
Absolutely, I recommend that, especially right now if you're stuck in your house. I don't know how many of you are quarantining, really still, but we are in our house, and I definitely find that I have an extra bedroom, which is my office, and that's great. But there are times when I just want to go sit on the porch, or I want to go sit in my most comfortable chair. That's in my family room. I do sometimes even sit in my kitchen, and I do find that depending on what I'm doing, and the different change of location does help me. I get stuck a little bit in a rut So I do find that that's helpful, but you just have to figure out if it works for you. I mean, like I said, if you're in the kitchen and you're constantly getting distracted by other family members and things like that, then it's not good, but I would recommend it.
Awesome. The next one is about prioritization. If you can give a little bit more information on that. So this person has three essays for three different AP classes that they're taking, and they get an excessive amount of homework. How would you kind of
Mhm.
prioritize all of that to help make sure that you complete everything on time?
That's good. And that's terrible. That's awful. So yeah, three papers at once is hard. And you will have, everybody has weeks like that where you just have harder weeks and you have easier weeks. And so the main thing is to remember to stay in your routine, even when you have those easier weeks, because that just helps to keep your momentum going. But when you're trying to write all these papers, prioritizing them, they're all important. What I would do is either start with the one that's the easiest or the one that is the most interesting to you, just to get the momentum going. I would start there. And, it's up to you how you work. I mean, sometimes I find there's days when I found there was days when I was better at reading and days when I was better at writing. There were days when I was better at trying to find my research and taking notes, and then days when I could just sit and focus for, a longer period of time and actually write a rough draft. So you kind of have to find what works for you, as far as also what's going on around your house. And, are there days when your house is more loud? I mean, I have a son who plays the drums and he has drum lessons. So on the days when he's having drum lessons, I'm not going to sit and try to do a really super intensive brain project. I'm going to that's probably when I'm going to change rooms and I'm going to go sit somewhere else and try to do something different that, that I can not really have to focus 100%. So anyways, I would just say that they're all important. Everything is a priority. I understand that. So you're going to have to start somewhere, get your momentum, and do little bits at a time. Again, I would never, ever schedule yourself to sit for like 4 or 5 hours straight. Always give yourself breaks. I would, if for something like that, maybe you work for a couple of hours in the morning doing something and you take a break in the middle of the day and get outside or whatever, and then you start again in the afternoon or the evening, whatever. And I don't know what your school schedule looks like, but try to break it up. And start wherever you feel like, okay, I can do this. This one looks like it's either the easiest or the simplest, or like I already have an idea of what I want to do here. Start there and then go get momentum, and the other ones will come a little easier.
All right. So kind of similar again, uh, focusing on where you're working, but should students try to create a designated break space, so that when they're studying, they have a separated space that they can go to kind of like separate themselves from all the work that they have to do?
Yes, I completely agree with that. I do, because when you see, sometimes if you're seeing something, it's causing you to feel overwhelmed or stressed. And so sometimes you need to not see it. And so, yeah, walking away from your laptop is in one room. And sometimes you need to just walk into a different room and go, yeah, have a snack or go exercise or whatever it might be. But yes, I definitely agree that you should, if you can, try to be able to walk away and not see something for a bit and really clear your mind from it. But also, I will say there is something to be said too by walking away from something and not clearing your mind, but thinking about it without doing it. So a lot of times what I do is if I'm trying to, like, let's just say, put this presentation together, I found that I would work on it for a little while and then I would just take my dogs for a walk. And while I'm walking, new ideas would come to my mind. Oh, I remember when I was in school, I did this. And then I just kind of let my brain kind of wander and think some more about it, reflect, and then come back to my office. And now, okay, I'm going to put all those things down that I just came up with. So sometimes that's helpful too.
All right. I think you actually talked about this a little bit earlier, but just as a refresher, for a mother, how can you help encourage your son to understand the importance of time management?
Oh, I wish I had the answer. Um, I have a college student who who even attended this webinar last time I did it, because I was like, you need to listen. Your mom knows stuff, but no, it doesn't always work. The thing is sometimes with kids, they have to learn on their own, right? So they have to fail or run out of time or stress themselves out. And my son does that. He's really good at acting like it's no big deal until the very end. And then he gets really stressed and hyperventilates. I mean, like, that's what he does. But that's, as much as I can tell him all these tips, and as much as he was even in the house while I was getting these degrees and was seeing the things that I was doing, and I consider myself a really good time manager, he didn't learn by me telling him or me demonstrating it. It just doesn't always work that way. He has to learn on his own. He has to want it. And so he has to find his own way. And as you, as a mother, trying to convince someone, I mean, what I would do is, the best thing is to provide some tips. Obviously, set a good example, remind them every so often. And then the really good thing to do is, with teenagers or however old, is, let them go through the stress. And then at the end, when it's over, stress is gone, they've completed whatever it was, the assignment or whatever, come back and say, let's just reflect on what just happened. Like, I noticed you got really stressed last week. What could you have done that was better? Is there anything I can do to help you? What did you think about how that went? Did it go the way you wanted it to? And a lot of times teenagers are going to say, yeah, it worked out. I'm fine. I got everything turned in. It's okay. And you're like, didn't look like it was okay. But the best thing to do is when they're not at the height of the stress, don't lecture at the height of the stress, because that never works. See if you can help them reflect back, and also see if you can't offer your services, and see if they may not say, well, Mom, it would have been really cool if you could have done blank or blank, and just open up a conversation. But it's always best to let them come up with the solution more so than lecturing.
All right. The next question, which we have time for a couple more questions, so feel free to submit those. This has to do with scheduling your time, but how can I motivate myself in the evening if that's just like a hard time to stay motivated?
I still struggle with this. I'm not a motivated evening person either. So I say sometimes little rewards. So, for me, it's like, okay, I have papers to grade. A lot of times I do that in the evenings. And so I just, tell myself, okay, I'm going to, finish dinner, and then I'm going to go grade a few papers. I'm going to try to get through, 8 to 10 papers tonight. And then I'm going to get myself dessert or something like that. For me, sugar is a motivator, I'll admit. Or, I used to, back when this pandemic first hit, it was like I would try to get to a certain point, and then my husband and I would go for a walk, and that, I like that. I like walking. So that was a reward to me. So try to think of things you can do to reward yourself for doing it, and then get through a certain point, and be realistic with yourself as to what you can accomplish in a certain amount of time. I think one of the biggest mistakes, like I've said before, that students make is they try to do too much at one time, and that's overwhelming. And then that leads to procrastination. So to motivate yourself, take, I'm just going to try to do 30 minutes of something. I'm just going to give myself just that much and see how that feels. And if you can add to it the next day or the next week, maybe you can, maybe you can't. Maybe you find 30 minutes is my limit. That's all I can do at night. Then you will feel the success, and it will motivate you to keep doing it. So that's my best advice. Little bits, and reward yourself.
All right, we'll do two more questions. You mentioned earlier a couple of apps to help stay organized. Are there any that you kind of use that you find work best for you? If you can give a little
Oh,
bit
good
more
question.
information about that.
I didn't use any of those apps when I was a student. I kind of wish I did, because I was looking at them when I was preparing this. I'm like, oh, it would have been so cool if I had known that existed. I'm kind of old school. I'm really, really into my calendar. Whenever I see any spot open on my calendar, and right now I'm not a student, so I'm just talking about for work, right? And then I teach on the side, so I have to figure that out and fit that into my schedule. But if I have an open amount of time on my calendar, let's say from 2 to 4, I notice I don't have any meetings, and I don't have any, other things I have to be doing at that time. I schedule that time, and I make a list of what I'm going to do in that time. And sometimes it's just one thing. During that time, I'm going to work on this particular project. And then I block it out on my calendar, so it looks like I'm busy, because I am, but that way I don't get distracted. I a lot of times close my email, and then I work on that project for that 2 hour block or whatever. So I use my calendar a lot. I block time off a lot. Um, and then I make a lot of lists. I have like a whiteboard that I've got. Actually, I still have it, but I got it when I was a student, and I made lists on my whiteboard and cross things off as I would go throughout the week. I would update it every week. I liked the feeling of making a list and crossing it off. So to me, that I'm old school. I could write it down on a piece of paper or use my notes in my phone. So those are the things I was doing, and I still do. But I would say for sure, if you're into the app kind of thing, try any of those. And if you even just look in the app store, but I'll go back to that slide so you can see the cool thing about, I'm a big into color coordinating things. I just see it that way. And I like this one. The pictures on there are actually the homework app. And but all of these had color coordinating ways you could do your lists and stuff like that. So I say that just try one of these and see how you feel about it. I wish I had tried it, honestly.
All right. And I think for our last question, this is probably something that will definitely differ for different people, but do you personally listen to any music or songs to
Huh.
help with studying or keeping on track and focused? And do you recommend that at all?
So much. Yes, 100%. I always listened to classical music when I was trying to study. I would get distracted by lyrics. So, and there is research that is not just me. A lot of people get distracted by hearing lyrics. So a lot of times it's just good to listen to something that's classical. And classical actually is good for your brain. So I would say that would be my number one. Of course, my kids would disagree and they listen to crazy loud, I don't know, rap or something when they're studying. I don't see how they do it, but that's their choice. But I definitely recommend classical. And I also will share this in one of my other webinars, as I also recommend you have a theme song. I had a theme song that got me through my entire doctorate. And I would play that song whenever I felt like a little discouraged, or I just needed like a pick me up, or like I was getting ready to sit down and write like a really important paper or work on my dissertation or something. I would listen to that song to motivate me. And so music is very powerful, and I highly recommend that you find that. Also, Spotify is really cool. If you look on Spotify, they have lists for studying, song lists, and you can find something there. It's great.
Awesome. I think that's about all we have for today. Um, just a reminder, there will be a recording that is sent out and will be available on YouTube. So if you ever need to come back to this, you can always view it there. And just a heads up, we are going to be working on an FAQ to kind of help answer anything that we didn't get to today, as well as reinforce some of the materials. But I hope you guys join the upcoming webinars, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.
All right.